Back in 2017, during the first Trump presidency, 3 celebrities who had received Kennedy Center honors for the arts refused to meet with the then President of the United States. That guy's president again now, and guess who's the new chairman of the Kennedy Center? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Steve Green, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, President Trump is now the chairman of the Kennedy Center and has replaced several of the board members with people who see things more his way. The Kennedy Center is this massive complex that's a very familiar thing in Washington, D.C. as far as the size of the building, and there's all kinds of colored lights on it. And there have been a lot of famous Broadway shows there and famous performers. But they do this annual award at the Kennedy Center where they recognize people who have contributed substantially to the arts. And back in 2017, Lionel Richie and Norman Lear and some dancer I've never heard of refused to do the traditional thing, which was go and visit at the White House and spend a little time with the president. That's sad, but this got me to thinking more broadly, Steve, because what the president is saying at this point is we shouldn't be supporting with taxpayer dollars an artistic endeavor that's basically committed to fighting everything that's great about America. If you want to, he didn't say it this way, but I'm saying, if you want to fight what's great about America, do it on your own dime. There's private money involved in the Kennedy Center, but I think something like 15% of its budget is funded by the federal government. Steve, does it sound like, is this a concerning thing? Do you think maybe President Trump is spreading himself too thin by stepping in and saying, look, I'm not only going to put my favored person in charge of the board here, but I'm going to be the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center? Or as a celebrity himself and somewhat of an artist, do you think that's an appropriate fit for him?
Well, okay. What was that line you said in your question? Something about, do you think the government should be funding arts that go against what makes America great? Was that it?
Roughly
that. So I would have put the period a little earlier. Should the government be funding the arts? And the answer is no, not one dime. Government eventually is going to corrupt anything it touches, just because eventually people you don't like are going to get a hold of those levers of power. And that's why the founders designed a constitution where the levers of power were limited and quite short. And now, of course, we've got a federal behemoth where there are, I don't know how many levers of power, and they're all very long. You can move a lot with those levers. So what I would really like to see Trump do, I don't care who really chairs the government position at the Kennedy Center. I don't want there to be a government position at the Kennedy Center. Yeah. There are places where politics and the arts overlap, but it shouldn't be in funding. It shouldn't be in decision making. In my segment this week, Bill was talking about the rise of Hitler in Germany in the 1930s. And what was really scary is some of the ideas he got in his pointy little skull once he was in power, and he was enabled in that by his...
Talking about me?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
No, Hitler. And he was enabled in that by his chief architect, Albert Speer. And you look at the plans they came up with for the new Berlin after the Nazi victory in World War II. Yeah, they were going to rename the city Germania, and it was all architecture that makes the brutalist architecture that this country got into after the war look tame in comparison. They were going to build these massive. Look it up. It's just hideous because Hitler was a frustrated artist, and you don't want to give frustrated artists unlimited political power because they're gonna inflict their horrible artistic visions on everybody. And I'm not saying we're going down that road. I'm not saying Trump is going down that road by becoming chairman of the Kennedy Center. What I am saying is we want to shorten those levers and we want to reduce their length, and that would be one tiny, nice little place to start. On the other hand, I am looking forward to this fall to getting some decent seats for Trump, the musical.
Bill, there's some concern that, with President Trump at the helm of the Kennedy Center, it'll be nothing but Lee Greenwood concerts as far as the eye could see. But it does. The reason why this topic attracted me was exactly what Steve was saying there. Isn't this a reasonable time to say, you know what, this is not, we don't want, more Americana in our government-sponsored art. We want less government-sponsored art, maybe none at all. And it also made me think about NPR and PBS. And, I listen to NPR on a regular basis, usually while showering. And this morning, they started off their newscast with what could only be described as a commercial for some service, the product. It would have been a commercial on any other network. It's a commercial there. And I just thought, you know what? If America wants that content, including the entertaining content that public radio does on the weekends and PBS does, then there's more than enough resources in the private sector to be able to fund that. And since, according to this Wall Street Journal story, the Kennedy Center itself is only, partially and to a small extent funded by the federal government, why not disentangle it all now?
Yeah, this is a little bit close to my topic, but yes, what we're finding is that left-wing ideology and left-wing, let's just call it the product, the product that the left puts out. People don't want to buy it, and it has to be subsidized. It has to be subsidized by the government. Now, there are people out there who are connoisseurs of fine cheeses, and I don't think there's a single person out there who really knows what good cheeses are who's lining up to buy government cheese. And and so you can think of government art in the same way as you could think of government cheese. It's always going to be, if you take the left-wing ideology out of it, chances are it's going to be pretty much art by committee. It's not going to be anything avant-garde or daring or new, and it shouldn't be, because that doesn't appeal to everybody. And if everybody's paying for it, then it should appeal to pretty much everybody. And if it appeals to pretty much everybody, it's not going to be good art. It's not going to be good drama, not going to be good music, not going to be, good anything like that. Now, look, the Kennedy Center exists, and some remarkable performances go on there, but Washington D.C., being the capital of the most powerful nation in the history of the world, should have a cultural center, should have a cultural presence that does not require the government. If New York City can manage to provide, top quality, symphony orchestras and so on, and we have the Los Angeles Philharmonic and so on and so forth, then the city itself should be able to produce its own art without having people from Dubuque pay for it, regardless of the ideological slant. This should be something that the cultural movers and shakers of Washington, the bright lights that go out to the parties and raise money, should be done through private donations, the way it's done in most other cities, so that you have, I came from, I spent 7 years of my life in Gainesville, Florida. They have a top-notch theater there called the Hippodrome Theater, and the Hippodrome is paid for through ticket prices. I'm sure they get some money from the state. But my point is, if Gainesville, Florida can have a thriving art community and see top-notch performances, you would think you could do the same thing in Washington freaking D.C.
Yeah. Being surrounded there by, 7 of the wealthiest zip codes in the United States, if not the 7 wealthiest zip codes in the United States. And to their credit, many very wealthy patrons, including very liberal, very wealthy patrons, have kept that institution alive. And they have given millions, in the aggregate, billions of dollars to go toward that. And I applaud that. They're exercising their ability to dispense with their funds in a way that brings delight to other people. That's fine. However, I think we've gotten to the point now, let's just historically, people will make the argument, they'll go, well, it's always required patronage to be able to support the arts. That was because people lived in monarchies where most people were poor and a very few people were wealthy, and the king or the princes or the dukes would support the arts. And basically, these artists would be indentured, talented servants who would create works of art for them. This is not the kind of country we live in. And in fact, there is a great market for high quality work in various forms, from dance to drama to paintings to song to whatever you want to look at. And so I would make the argument that at this time, the best thing that Chairman of the Kennedy Center, Donald Trump, could do is to disband the government portion of the funding of the Kennedy Center for the Arts and let the private sector completely run that operation. You may want to take President Kennedy's name off it. By the way, it was started in 1958 and only named for Kennedy when Kennedy was assassinated. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. But the problem, as Bill and Steve have pointed out, is that government funds what it thinks people should like, whether people want it or not. And so you are being, if you live in Dubuque, are being forced to pay for something that honestly only pretty wealthy people in Washington, D.C. can go to see. Their productions are not cheap. It's not like they're putting government money into this thing so you can go see an incredible production of a Shakespeare play, for $5 or something like that. So I hope President Trump takes the opportunity here to disinvest the federal government from this enterprise, and at the same time to do the same thing with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and PBS, as well as NPR. They advertise on NPR constantly when they're asking for money. The local station will say 92% of our funding comes from the local community. Here's saying, let's make that 100%. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.